What happened to little boy? What you doing in Hop Sing kitchen?
I just brung your knife back, Hop Sing.
That's so? The little boy take knife. The big boy take a donut. Bad boy. Very bad boy.
I got some real important things to be doing, Hop Sing. I'll see you.
Every single day, I drop a brand new video exploring the untold legends of Hollywood's golden era. If you love discovering the real stories behind your favorite stars, make sure to hit that subscribe button, drop a like, or leave a comment. It means everything and doesn't cost a thing. Now, let's jump straight into it. For decades, fans of Bonanza have been mesmerized by Hoss Cartwright, the gentle giant who brought warmth, laughter, and honesty to the Ponderosa Ranch. But what many never knew is that behind that cheerful grin, Dan Blocker, the man who gave life to Hoss, carried a world full of surprises, private battles, and mysteries he kept hidden from the spotlight. And now, years later, one of his sons, at 66 years old, has finally stepped forward to confirm something that's been quietly whispered about for generations, a revelation that could totally reshape how fans see Dan Blocker and the legacy he left behind. But before we unpack these long-kept secrets, we need to rewind time to where it all began, to the moment that set everything in motion. Dan Blocker's story kicked off with a bang, literally.
Dadgone! I'm sure getting tired. How about you? What are we fighting about, you know? I don't know.
Born as Bobby Dan Davis Blocker on December 10, 1928 in the small town of DeKalb, Texas, he made an unforgettable debut into the world, weighing a jaw-dropping 14 pounds. That's right, 14. Locals couldn't stop talking about the baby who made headlines before he could even crawl. Growing up in the humble community of O'Donnell, Texas, young Dan spent his childhood helping out at his family's grocery store, carrying bags for customers, and learning the meaning of hard work, respect, and kindness. Those early years shaped the down-to-earth, genuine man the world would later celebrate as Hoss Cartwright, a true heart of the frontier. And he had a heart that seemed way too big for Hollywood to handle. By the time Dan was just 10 years old, he was already out there working side by side with grown men, hauling grain, lifting lumber, and putting in real effort on construction sites. His strength was no joke, and folks around town started calling him the Big One, a nickname that stuck for life. After high school, Dan went on to the Texas Military Institute, where his size and athletic power made him an absolute force on the football field. His talent stood out fast, and soon he scored a football scholarship to Sul Ross State University. By then, he towered at 6'4" and weighed a solid 275 pounds. That's right, a kid built like a full-grown man.
Miss Ellie, ain't that your pickle fork over there?
I don't see any. Hoss Cartwright!
Remember, ma'am, I'm just a growing boy.
Some local tough guys tried to challenge him, but let's just say none of them ever came on top. Dan never backed down and never lost a match. His strength spoke louder than words. After college, Dan traded his textbooks for a uniform, ready to serve his country and face whatever came his way. Still, stepping into military life wasn't exactly easy, not for a man like him. Standing tall over 6'3" and weighing 290 pounds, he was a powerhouse of strength, and even the Army had to adjust. It took nearly a month just to find boots big enough to fit those massive feet, but once he suited up, there was no turning back. Dan was soon sent overseas into one of the most intense military conflicts of his generation, the Korean War. By Christmas of 1951, he found himself on the front lines near Chorwon, North Korea, serving as a combat infantry sergeant with the 179th Infantry Regiment. Out there, it wasn't about fame or glory. It was about survival. The icy wind cut through the air like shards of glass, and the nights dragged on endlessly, cold and sleepless. The sounds of distant blasts echoed through the dark hills, but through every moment, Dan stood firm, leading his men, keeping them together, and proving that his strength ran far deeper than muscle. It came from pure heart, grit, and loyalty. For nearly 7 long months, Blocker endured harsh conditions, mud, cold, and chaos everywhere. Yet he never gave up. And then came one unforgettable night, the kind of moment that defines what kind of person someone really is. In the middle of relentless crossfire, Dan spotted one of his fellow soldiers injured and trapped, unable to move. Without hesitation, he sprinted right into danger, pulling his comrade to safety while the air filled with the roar of gunfire all around. "What happened to little boy? What you doing in Hop's sink kitchen?" "I just brought knife back, Hops, that's all." "The little boy take knife, the big boy take a donut. Bad boy, very bad boy." "I've got some real important things to be doing, Hops. I'll see ya." That moment of raw bravery left him injured, but it earned him one of the nation's highest honors, the Purple Heart, a medal he carried with quiet pride for the rest of his life. What he faced in those frozen hills would leave a mark on him forever. The gentle giant had proven his courage long before Hollywood ever rolled a camera on him. The battles on Porkchop Hill became some of the most intense moments of the entire Korean War, a landscape of pure endurance where every inch of ground came at a heavy cost. It was there that Dan Blocker and his regiment dug in deep, holding their ground with everything they had. Blood, sweat, and sacrifice were those long months made of. The exhaustion was endless, and the danger never truly went away. After months of pushing through constant battles, Dan's body had finally reached its limit. He was evacuated from the front lines, tired, worn down, and carrying injuries that went far deeper than anyone could see. But even as he lay in a military hospital recovering, his spirit stayed unshaken. He had faced the worst of war's chaos and lived to tell the tale. When Dan finally returned home, he wasn't the same man who had left Texas all those years before. The things he'd seen and endured changed him, not into someone bitter, but into someone deeply aware of what conflict really costs. He had fought with pride and honor, but now he understood the heavy price of destruction, and he refused to stay quiet about it. Dan became a strong voice for peace and understanding, speaking out against unnecessary wars and standing up for compassion over violence. He especially spoke out against destructive weapons, tools of harm he had witnessed firsthand on the battlefield. For Dan, peace wasn't just a dream or a political stance, it was personal. It was a promise to never forget the suffering he had seen and to push for something better. But life wasn't finished surprising Dan Blocker just yet. After coming home and leaving the battlefield behind, he was ready for something brighter, something filled with love, laughter, and purpose. He married his college sweetheart, Dulphia Parker, and together they built a warm, joyful home filled with 4 wonderful children. Family became his peace, his steady ground after years of turmoil. And though acting hadn't been part of his original plan, destiny had one more twist waiting. While working toward his doctorate at UCLA, Dan's towering frame, deep voice, and easygoing Southern charm caught the eye of Hollywood casting directors. Before long, the towering Texan who had once faced the battlefield was stepping into a brand new kind of spotlight, one that would turn him into a Hollywood legend forever. During television's golden era, Westerns ruled the screen, and Dan Blocker looked like he was born for that world. With his rugged charm, powerful build, and the perfect mix of toughness and heart, he was a natural fit for the wild, dusty stories that America couldn't get enough of. It didn't take long before producers came knocking, eager to cast him in roles that showed off his natural charisma. Dan started out with small but unforgettable appearances in hit shows like Gunsmoke and Colt 45, where he immediately stood out. Even in short scenes, he brought a warmth, humor, and authenticity that made audiences remember him long after the credits rolled. Throughout the 1950s, Dan hustled non-stop, building his name with guest spots in some of the era's most iconic westerns, including The Rifleman, Have Gun Will Travel, and Maverick. Every role, no matter how brief, added another layer to his growing legend. The big guy with the bigger heart, who could light up a screen with just one grin. Then came 1957, the year his dedication truly paid off. Dan landed a major role in The Restless Gun, and his performance struck a chord with viewers everywhere. Suddenly, Hollywood started paying serious attention. Offers poured in, and soon he found himself playing Tiny Buttinger, the lovable, clumsy ranch hand in Cimarron City. That role revealed something special, a side of Dan that audiences hadn't seen before. His sharp comedic timing, his easygoing warmth, and his magnetic personality made people instantly adore him. Then came the moment that changed everything. Dan Blocker's big break. He landed the role of Hoss Cartwright on Bonanza, and it became the part of a lifetime. Hoss wasn't just another cowboy, he was the warm-hearted, good-natured son of the powerful Cartwright family, and the role fit Dan perfectly. With that easy charm, big smile, and heart of gold, he brought something rare to television: real soul. Hoss Cartwright became the heart of Bonanza. He wasn't just a side character, he was the emotional core, the one who brought laughter, kindness, and balance to every episode. From that moment on, Dan Blocker wasn't just an actor, he was a television icon. His performance didn't just define his career, it carved his name permanently into TV history. Before long, Dan's face was known in homes across America. He was the kind of actor people felt connected to, like a trusted friend they'd grown up with. As Hoss, he might not have been the most quick-witted of the Cartwright clan, but he didn't need to be. His warmth, humor, and honest heart made him unforgettable. Hoss Cartwright was the gentle giant everyone loved, the man who could make you laugh one minute and tear up the next. Families adored him, and children saw him as a true role model, loyal, kind, and always ready to lend a helping hand. But for Dan, playing Hoss wasn't just acting. It was deeply personal. He poured his own values into the character, drawing inspiration from the words of 18th century Quaker missionary Stephen Grillette, who once said, "Do all the good you can." That quote became Dan's quiet motto, guiding how he lived and worked. Through Hoss, Dan brought those words to life, with honesty, compassion, and a strong sense of justice that felt completely real. You could feel his sincerity in every scene, every smile, every act of kindness. He became a true symbol of goodness in a world that didn't always feel kind. But off-camera, Dan Blocker was a very different man from the simple cowboy people saw on TV. He was sharp, educated, and deeply reflective, a thinker through and through. He earned a master's degree in theater, loved diving into philosophy, and could talk for hours about books, art, and ideas. Yet, despite his intelligence and success, Dan stayed humble, grounded, and full of heart, never losing touch with who he really was. His portrayal of Hoss had depth, layers that went beyond the cowboy hat and smile. You could feel both the tenderness of a loyal friend and the quiet strength of a man who had seen life's darker sides and still chose kindness. Having lived through the harsh realities of war, Dan understood exactly how valuable peace truly was. His massive frame might have made him look perfect for the part, but it was his gentle, soulful nature that gave Hoss Cartwright life. Within just 2 years, Dan became part of one of television's most beloved families. Behind the scenes, he formed a real bond with his Bonanza co-stars, Lorne Greene and Michael Landon. Their friendship went far beyond the cameras. It was genuine brotherhood. Dan and Michael grew so close that Dan even stood as best man at Landon's wedding to Lynn No, a moment that proved just how strong their connection was. Even with Bonanza dominating his schedule, Dan still found time to branch out into films. He shared the screen with Hollywood legends like Frank Sinatra in classics like Come Blow Your Horn and Lady in Cement. No matter what project he took on, one thing always stood out. Dan Blocker wasn't just playing heroes, he was one. The heart behind every role, the man who brought warmth, humor, and light to every story he touched. And even as his fame spread coast to coast, Dan never lost touch with his roots. Back in his hometown of O'Donnell, Texas, people were bursting with pride. To them, Dan was still the same down-to-earth kid they'd grown up with. Kind, humble, and full of life. Only now that same hometown boy was bringing joy and laughter into living rooms across America. Fame, as bright as it shines, always comes with its shadows. Dan Blocker's role as Hoss Cartwright on Bonanza turned him into a true national treasure, a household name loved by millions. But the funny thing was, stardom was never something Dan chased. Sure, he loved acting and storytelling, but he wasn't built for the endless attention that followed him everywhere. With his towering frame and warm, easygoing nature, Dan was impossible to miss, and people felt instantly connected to him. Everywhere he went, fans wanted to greet him, shake his hand, or call out, "Hoss Cartwright!" And while he genuinely appreciated the kindness and support, the constant spotlight began to wear on him. Dan wasn't someone who craved attention. He was a man of peace, family, and quiet values. He wanted to do good work, take care of his loved ones, and live a calm, grounded life. But as his fame kept growing, that kind of balance became harder and harder to find. One perfect example came during what was meant to be a peaceful family getaway to the Yucatan. Dan had planned it as a simple escape. No cameras, no scripts, just relaxation with his wife and kids. But the second he stepped off the plane, locals recognized him instantly. Everywhere he went, smiling crowds gathered, waving and calling out, "Hoss!" turning his quiet vacation into an unexpected public event. Still, Dan handled it with grace, smiling, greeting fans, never letting frustration show. But deep down, he knew he wanted something more balanced, a life where he and his family could enjoy privacy, peace, and nature, without the constant flash of cameras. So, in 1970, Dan made a bold move. He packed up his family and took them on a trip to Switzerland, drawn by the breathtaking lakes and stunning mountain views he'd admired in National Geographic. And the moment they arrived, it was love at first sight. The calm, the beauty, the quiet. It was exactly what he had been searching for. The peaceful beauty of Lake Como, Lake Maggiore, and Lake Lugano left Dan absolutely speechless. It was everything Hollywood wasn't: calm, quiet, and completely real. For him, Switzerland felt like the dream he'd been chasing for years, a place where he could finally breathe, watch his kids grow up, and live life on his own terms. The Blocker family quickly settled into their new home, surrounded by calm lakes and rolling green hills that seemed straight out of a painting. It wasn't just peace they found, it was a new rhythm of life, filled with meaning and simplicity. Their children thrived in international schools, learning new languages and cultures, while Dan finally got to enjoy mornings without studio calls or flashing lights. For the first time in years, he felt truly content. His days were full of family, purpose, and a deep, quiet joy that no fame could ever replace. But back in the States, the rumor mill started buzzing. Whispers floated around that Dan had left Hollywood because of money issues. But that couldn't have been further from the truth. Dan was quick to set the record straight. Bonanza had treated him very well financially, and he was grateful for every opportunity it gave him. His decision to step back wasn't about money, it was about peace of mind and living a life that actually felt like his own. In Switzerland, Bonanza aired dubbed in German, and that turned out to be an unexpected blessing. The language barrier gave Dan something he hadn't had in years: real privacy. He could walk down the street, enjoy a cup of coffee by the lake, and spend time with his family without constant recognition or interruptions. In Switzerland, things were completely different. No crowds shouting hoss or groups surrounding him for autographs. For the first time in years, Dan could simply exist, enjoying quiet strolls through the countryside, browsing local markets, and watching his kids play without a crowd gathering around. The rolling hills, crystal-clear lakes, and calm mountain air gave him the peace he had been craving for so long. Even with all his fame and fortune, Dan Blocker stayed humble and grounded. He never acted above anyone else and never forgot how fortunate he was. He often spoke about how tough life could be for hard-working folks, especially teachers, a group he deeply respected. Having once worked as a teacher himself, he knew how much effort they gave and how little appreciation or pay they often received. Fairness and compassion weren't just ideas to Dan, they were part of who he was. He also had a sharp sense of humor and a down-to-earth view of his own fame. In one interview, he even joked, "Let's face it, I sold out for money." It was said with a laugh, a moment of pure honesty from a man who never took himself too seriously. He understood the irony of becoming famous for something that started out as just a job to pay the bills. Though he sometimes thought about returning to teaching, his life as Hoss Cartwright had become so massive that slipping back into a quiet life seemed nearly impossible. But even far from Hollywood, Dan never lost his conscience or his courage to speak out when something felt wrong. In the 1960s, Bonanza often filmed across the United States, including in parts of the Deep South, a region still struggling with painful racial divides at the time. The civil rights movement was fighting to bring real change, but prejudice and inequality were still deeply rooted. Dan saw this firsthand, and it deeply bothered him. During one of Bonanza's filming trips down south, the cast and crew pulled up to a hotel and were suddenly hit with a harsh reality that stopped everyone in their tracks. The hotel staff refused to allow their African-American crew members to stay there because of the hotel's discriminatory rules. The room went silent, then filled with outrage. How could something like that still be happening? Before anyone else could even react, Dan Blocker, the same gentle giant who played Hoss Cartwright, stepped forward. His calm eyes carried fire, and his presence alone demanded attention. He didn't shout or lose his temper, but every word he spoke hit with force. He looked the staff in the eye and said firmly, "If you won't take all of us, then none of us are staying here." It wasn't just talk, it was a stand, a clear, powerful line drawn in the sand. In that single moment, Dan proved that the fairness, kindness, and decency people saw on TV weren't just part of a script, they were who he truly was. His courage and loyalty spoke louder than any line he'd ever delivered on screen. Dan's sense of justice was as strong as his frame. Beneath that friendly smile was a man who couldn't stand cruelty or inequality in any form. He wasn't interested in fame or applause. He cared about doing what was right. In 1964, Dan said it as plain as day. "I hate a bully worse than anything. I'm a big man and I don't like fights, but if I see a 180-pound guy picking on someone smaller, you can bet I'll step in to take care of it fast." That quote summed Dan up perfectly. Strength with purpose, power used to protect, never to harm. His stand during those Bonanza years wasn't just about a single hotel. It was a reflection of his heart, his character, and his unshakable belief that everyone deserves respect. Brave, fair, and unwilling to tolerate injustice, that was Dan Blocker through and through. He didn't just play a man of values on TV, he lived those values every single day. He used his fame and influence to lead by example, showing that sometimes it only takes one voice, one person brave enough to do what is right, to inspire real change. But there was another side to Dan that fans adored just as much. The man loved to eat. His appetite was legendary, almost as famous as his kindness. Friends and co-stars would joke that watching Dan at mealtime was like watching a one-man buffet in action. Breakfast for Dan wasn't just another meal, it was an event. He'd kick off his morning with a spread that would leave most people speechless. We're talking a dozen eggs, 2 full loaves of bread, and a couple of quarts of milk before noon. And believe it or not, that was just the beginning. As the day went on, the plates kept coming. Piles of hearty meats, mountains of potatoes, and more bread than most bakeries could handle. People around him couldn't believe how much he could put away and still flash that relaxed, easygoing grin that made everyone around him feel at home. For Dan, food wasn't just about eating, it was about joy, comfort, and connection. Sharing a good meal meant laughter, conversation, and love, the kind of simple, genuine happiness he valued most. His passion for a full plate was just another reflection of who he was, larger than life in every possible way, full of warmth, humor, and a big appetite for everything good in the world. Dan Blocker's love for food became part of his legend, a true Texas-sized tale that perfectly matched the man himself. Staying loyal to his roots, he had a deep affection for hearty, down-home meals that could feed a crowd. One of Dan's all-time favorite indulgences? A full roasted ham. And yes, he could finish the whole thing himself without breaking a sweat. When it came to fruits and veggies, well, those weren't exactly at the top of his list. But sweets? That was another story entirely. Dan had a real soft spot for cakes, pies, and cookies, anything warm, homemade, and baked with love. For Dan, food wasn't just about filling the plate, it was part of his identity. It reminded him of home, laughter around the dinner table, and family gatherings back in Texas. Every bite carried a little piece of his roots, his memories, and the warmth of simple living. His love for good food even spilled over into his business life. Dan became a co-owner of the Ponderosa Steakhouse chain, named after the iconic ranch from Bonanza. It was the perfect fit. A restaurant built around generous, hearty meals that filled you up and made you smile. And the best part? As a co-owner, Dan could eat for free at any Ponderosa location, and you can bet he enjoyed that perk every chance he got. But even with all the good food and success, Dan knew that being Haas Cartwright came with responsibilities. Hollywood had its pressures, and keeping up his on-screen look meant walking a fine line between discipline and indulgence. He'd go through periods of strict diets and intense workouts, doing his best to stay fit for the cameras. But those rich home-style meals and sweet desserts always had a way of calling him back. Over time, the back and forth between dieting and treating himself began to take a toll. The constant balancing act wasn't easy, and during the later seasons of Bonanza, Dan's weight started to fluctuate quite a bit. The wardrobe team even had to use light padding at times to keep Haas's familiar, larger-than-life image consistent on screen. Still, none of that ever dimmed Dan's love for food or his passion for life. Off camera, his castmates often watched in amazement as Dan sat down with that trademark grin and enjoyed another big plate of steak and potatoes like it was a celebration. He didn't do anything halfway. Not acting, not eating, not living. Dan Blocker's appetite, both for food and for life itself, became as legendary as the man he was, full of warmth, humor, and that unmistakable Texas spirit. No matter how many people joined him at the table, Dan could out-eat them all and still look completely relaxed. It became part of his myth, the gentle giant with the endless appetite and an even bigger heart. But behind all the laughter, stories, and good meals, life was about to take a heartbreaking turn. In the early 1970s, as the Vietnam War brought waves of political and emotional turmoil across America, Dan Blocker, the beloved Hoss Cartwright from Bonanza, made a life-changing decision. He packed up his family and left Hollywood behind, moving to the calm, picturesque countryside of Switzerland. For Dan, it wasn't about running from fame. It was about finding peace, a chance to live quietly, far from the tension and unrest taking over his home country. Even from across the ocean, his loyalty to Bonanza never faded. Dan continued flying back and forth between Europe and the US, staying fully dedicated to the show and to the fans who loved him so much. Every time he stepped on set, he gave his all. Every smile, every laugh, every heartfelt scene came straight from his soul. But as Bonanza moved into its later seasons, Dan's health quietly began to decline. Doctors found that he had gallstones, a fairly common condition that required surgery. It wasn't expected to be serious, just a simple operation to remove his gallbladder. Everyone around him felt confident it would go smoothly. And at first it did. The surgery went well, and Dan's loved ones breathed a sigh of relief when they saw him recovering, smiling, cracking jokes, and sounding like his old self again. Everything seemed fine, until suddenly, things took a devastating turn. Without warning, Dan suffered a severe medical complication, a blood clot that blocked his lungs. It happened fast, leaving no time to respond. The world of television lost one of its brightest lights that day, and those who knew him personally lost a truly kind and extraordinary man. The news of Dan Blocker's passing sent shockwaves through Hollywood and far beyond. Fans everywhere were in disbelief. How could the man who seemed larger than life, the one who brought so much heart and laughter to Bonanza, be gone at just 43 years old? It didn't seem real. His co-stars were devastated, especially those who had worked closely with him for years and knew the kind, genuine person behind the camera. Tributes poured in from every direction. Letters, flowers, and messages overflowing with love and gratitude. People didn't just mourn Hoss Cartwright, the character they saw on screen. They mourned Dan Blocker, the man who made millions smile with his warmth, humor, and humanity. His passing left a hole in the entertainment world that no one could ever fill. A powerful reminder that even the biggest hearts can be taken far too soon. Not long after his death, an unusual and fascinating rumor began to spread, one that would capture people's imaginations for decades. It was the kind of tale that sounded too wild to be true, yet somehow it seemed to fit perfectly with the legend of Dan Blocker himself. The question people whispered was strange but persistent. Was Dan Blocker really buried in a piano crate? At over 300 pounds, Dan was famously larger than life, both in presence and in spirit, and it didn't take long for whispers to grow. The rumor claimed that his coffin had to be custom built from a piano crate because nothing else could hold him. The story spread fast, passed along in magazines, interviews, and fan chatter until it became a piece of Hollywood folklore, blending truth and imagination so seamlessly that even loyal fans began to believe it. To many, the idea seemed almost poetic. The mighty Hoss Cartwright laid to rest in something grand and unique, a send-off as unforgettable as the man himself. It fit the image of a larger-than-life Texan whose laughter, heart, and energy filled every room he entered. But as colorful as that story sounded, the truth was far simpler and far more respectful. Dan Blocker was laid to rest with dignity, surrounded by family and love, not legend. Dan Blocker was laid to rest in a traditional casket at Woodlawn Cemetery in Santa Monica, California. No piano crate, no dramatic send-off, just a respectful farewell for a man who lived his life with honesty, warmth, and heart. The rumor about the piano box, as strange as it was, became more than just a story. It became a symbol of how deeply people loved him. Fans simply couldn't accept the idea that someone as extraordinary as Dan could have such a simple, ordinary goodbye. But in truth, that simplicity was perfect, because that's exactly who Dan Blocker was: humble, genuine, and real. The tale of the piano box wasn't really about size or spectacle. It was about love, about how legends are born from the people we miss most. It showed just how much he had touched lives, how much people wanted to hold on to the memory of a man whose presence felt larger than life. But while fans were sharing stories and keeping his memory alive, the cast and crew of Bonanza were facing heartbreak behind the scenes. Dan's sudden passing on May 13, 1972, hit everyone like a thunderclap. It wasn't just a personal loss. It marked the beginning of the end for one of television's most beloved shows. On screen, Cartwright had been the emotional center of the Bonanza family, the heart that held everything together. His warmth, humor, and unshakable goodness gave the show its soul. Without him, the Ponderosa didn't feel the same anymore. As production prepared for the next season, the mood on set was heavy. Lorne Greene, Michael Landon, and the rest of the cast struggled to imagine continuing without their friend. Every line felt harder to say, every scene emptier without that familiar laughter echoing behind the cameras. The crew hadn't just lost a co-star, they'd lost a brother, a protector, and the calm, steady force that made the long days of filming feel like family. And though Bonanza tried to carry on, everyone knew the heart of the show had left with Dan, the man who made millions laugh, who stood up for what was right, and who lived with kindness in everything he did. He was irreplaceable. Even decades later, Dan Blocker's spirit still shines through every rerun, every smile that crosses a fan's face, every warm memory shared about Cartwright. He wasn't just a TV cowboy. He was proof that strength and kindness can live side by side, that real heroes don't just ride into the sunset, they live on forever in the hearts of those who loved them.